Welcome back to American Republic. This is the last video that we'll be watching for week 5. So you should have your chapter 22 test done. You should have, that's all you needed to get done so far, but I will be assigning homework at the end of class. Please make sure that when I assign your homework that you do it. It'll be assigned at the end, as well as the quiz I'll be assigning. Also, make sure you've taken the Chapter 22 test. Also, please make sure that you separate your notes from the things that you'll be turning back in with your packets. It'll save us all a bunch of headache that you have your notes for next week. We've been talking about World War II and Hitler's rise to power. Hitler has taken over Austria and Czechoslovakia in a semi-peaceful manner, and now his invasion of Poland started World War II. But not only Poland, he's invaded Denmark and Norway and Luxembourg and Belgium and the Netherlands. And lastly, we mentioned that France had fallen to the German Blitzkrieg. After France's defeat, Britain stood alone against the dictators. Many believed that a land invasion of Britain was imminent. In fact, British officials even removed signs indicating directions and distances to towns in England, hoping to confuse any German forces landing on the island. Instead, Hitler decided to bomb the island into submission. This is referred to as the Battle of Britain. German planes bombed English cities and fought with Britain's Royal Air Force, the RAF, in the air. Most bombing raids occurred at night, so ground fire could not easily see the planes in the sky. The British responded by fighting with their Royal Air Force. Their efforts prevented the fall of Britain. But this time was a really dangerous, really scary time. Imagine being in a war situation which you are woken up in the middle of the night to hear sirens going off, not because of a tornado or because of a storm, but because the Germans or the enemy is planning a bombing raid. You need to find a shelter site. And by the way, your house was not one of those places. The subway stations that the British had at this time might have been the best option. And so people had specific areas that they knew they had to get to when these raids took place. In the end, though, the British won the Battle of Britain. Churchill said of the RAF, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." I've mentioned Winston Churchill a few times. I've quoted him a few times. He is a huge influence on the war effort during this darkest hour. Sir Winston Churchill became the man of the hour during Great Britain's greatest trial. His oratory did much to inspire the British people. He said, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many long months of toil and struggle. You ask, what is our policy? I will say it is to wage war with all of our might, with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. We shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Had the attacks continued, the outcome might have been different. But Hitler grew impatient and was suffering from the loss of manpower and his planes. British determination persuaded him to seek another approach to victory. Letter D. Hitler turns against the Soviet Union. This is the topic of an essay that you need to know, pages 457 and 458 in your textbook gives you more information in case you want to refer to that as you work on this essay topic. In 1941, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and Greece had all fallen to Germany. You can see these countries located here: Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Greece. All of these countries had fallen now to German control. But don't worry, Soviets and Germans, they promised not to fight each other, so they're going to keep that promise, right? Yeah, not right. All of these countries are in southeastern Europe. Turkey's declaration of neutrality completed the conquest of the Balkans. In June of 1941, Hitler attacked the Soviet Union. What were the benefits and the drawbacks to attacking the Soviet Union? That's a good question to consider. Why did Hitler choose to do this? Well, Hitler hated the communists. He also thought that Britain was still fighting because the Soviets might join with the British. He also wanted Soviet resources for German use. Russia had plenty of raw materials that could be used in Germany's war. However, there were also some drawbacks, some negatives. Hitler would have to fight now on two fronts, and he was invading the Soviet Union too late in the summer. The Soviets responded with what became known as a scorched earth policy, destroying everything that could be useful to the Germans. This was not the first time the Soviets or the Russians used scorched earth policy. Remember, it was used during Napoleon's time with similar effect. Initially, the Russian people saw Hitler as a liberator from Stalin's communist regime. Remember, Stalin is the leader of the Soviet Union. He was not a nice guy either. And so many thought that Hitler was better than Stalin. Well, turns out that wasn't the case for the Russian people. But the Nazis were not friendly. Germans ravaged towns and tortured Russian civilians. As the Soviets retreated, they destroyed all crops and livestock they could not take with them. The supplies the Germans hoped to capture were gone, and their supply lines from Germany were stretched thin. By winter, the Soviets had brought the Germans to a halt. As the Russian winter blew in, the German soldiers were not prepared for it. Many still wore summer uniforms. They used thin oil, which now in the cold winter froze, and tanks, trucks, and planes of the Blitzkrieg could not operate. Just like Napoleon before him, the Russian winter had prevented Hitler from defeating Russia. If you look in your books at page 458, it shows you a map of Europe in 1941, and you can see how large Germany and Italy had grown during this war, how much territory they had taken. See how far into Russia they had gotten, and yet it won't be quite far enough. Meanwhile, what was going on in America? American sympathies and fears grow. Most Americans simply hoped the Allies would win, and they favored isolation. Some Americans feared that if Britain fell, Germany might attack the U.S. next. The U.S. allowed the Allies to buy war material from American companies if the Allies paid cash and supplied their own ships. The U.S. also passed the first peacetime draft in 1940. Some 375,000 men were drafted and started training to be ready for a possible attack. The American First Committee, which included such prominent members as Charles Lindbergh, pleaded for American neutrality. And Franklin Roosevelt was elected to an unprecedented third term in 1940 when he promised not to send American troops into the foreign war. Question might be asked, how could so many Americans still wish to remain neutral? Well, some answers could be it was a foreign war. America's traditionalism promoted isolationism. Another thought is, well, the Allies are going to lose anyways, so what's the point in getting involved in the war? They're going to lose. And there was the hope that fascism and communism would destroy each other. Americans didn't like either one. They hoped maybe by fighting each other, they would destroy each other. While America is still neutral, America will promote what is called the Lend-Lease Act. It allowed the U.S. to trade war equipment with the Allies in exchange for property. When things looked bad for Britain in 1941, Roosevelt sought to find a way to help them. Under normal trading conditions, money is given for the goods needed. With penniless Britain to deal with, the U.S. gave some of its war supplies in return for island bases in the Atlantic that would be helpful for U.S. defenses. As you can see from the political cartoon, Uncle Sam, of course, planned to lend Britain arms, holding weapons. Hitler over here saying, "You're playing with dynamite." And then you can't see the caption at the bottom. It says, Uncle Sam says, "It would be dynamite if I didn't." The idea is, hey, if I'm not helping them now, it's going to be bad for me later. That was the changing view of Americans as the war progressed. Due to continued aggression, Roosevelt froze all Axis assets in the U.S. and cut off nearly all trade with Japan. The strain between the two nations increased as Japan continued to expand its power in defiance of American interests. Japan decided that if it could not trade with America for the resources it needed, it would take them from its Pacific neighbors. That's a good cliffhanger to leave us on. That's all the notes we're going to cover for today and this week. For your homework, draw a line in your notes. Know that you have a quiz over these notes. Please study the notes. Take the quiz over those notes. That'll be due with your Week 5 packet. Also, page 201 and 202 in your activities book. Page 201 is called Prelude to World War II. It says, on the following table, indicate with an X which country each of the statements on the left described during the years leading up to World War II. Some descriptions might require that you mark more than one country. For example, description, not satisfied with results of the peace made after World War I. Which country is it talking about? The answer is all three of them. So make sure you draw an X in the country that it's referring to. And then, page 202. It says, arrange the following events chronologically by numbering them from 1 to 10, with 1 being the first event to occur. So make sure that on the homework you identify which events happened, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and so on up through 10. So you have the homework, you have the quiz, and the Chapter 22 test that you are turning in. Please, please, please remember to keep the notes for Chapter 23 with you. Hope you all have a good day. Hope you all have a good weekend. Be good, do good. Bye.